Imagine waiting 2 weeks to know if you got a like or not, or a thumbs up. In the decades before the internet, people made comics, and we reached out to each other. What was it like? This is the Sequential Artists Workshop, and these are the 90s mini comics oral history archives. Come join us as we take a longer look at those analog days when communication was a lot slower, maybe more deliberate, maybe more reckless. Who knows? It was just different. Join us as we take a look and really notice how much things have changed. Come join us on the socials. Sometimes it's Comics Workshop, sometimes it's Saw Comics. Either way, come check us out and welcome.
All right, hi everyone. This is our new episode in the 90s era mini comics oral history archives. Today we are interviewing Liz Prince. Yeah, I'm really excited to just jump on in. For an introduction, can you please say your name, the date, and where you are recording from?
Sure. My name is Liz Prince. The date is October 2nd, 2024. Right? I didn't mess up the date. Good. I don't normally know what day it is. And I'm recording from my home studio in Portland, Maine.
Awesome. And what are some comics publications that you created or were a part of in the early internet days?
Well, I got my start making comics for a zine that was local to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I grew up. A woman who worked with my mom, who was like around the same age as my mom, made this cool zine called Are We There Yet? Very cut and paste, February 95. And also I just ran, this is the first issue that I had a comic published in, but the back of it is also, it's a little collage comic she made. And I like that the guy says, how biblical. Just great. So yeah, I've always made comics, and I was kind of trying to make things like, this is so bad. The idea that she wanted to publish my comics when I was 13 years old is surprising given the content. But so it's like a guy swearing, cut me off, blah, blah. Where do you get those neat signs? So like she saw me like doodling that, at my mom's job, and was like, hey, you should do comics for my zine. So that was really like my introduction to zine culture, and really the only place that I published comics in print in the 90s. My first foray into putting comics on the internet was I think it was in 2000. I went on the Internet Archive, tried to use the Wayback Machine to find this website that does not exist anymore. It was called The Art Conspiracy, and it was kind of like a precursor to a site like DeviantArt, where you had like a profile and you posted art on it. And I didn't have a scanner, but my best friend Daniel did, and so he would scan my comics like out of my sketchbooks and just kind of like random drawings. And I met like a big group of people from that, some of whom I'm still friends with to this day, which is kind of bizarre. But I stopped using Art Conspiracy probably in like 2002 or 2003, and I started posting comics on my live journal. And unbeknownst to me, I did an interview, and I feel bad because I can't remember what the publication was or who I was talking to, but they basically were like, oh, well, like you were one of the first people who was like regularly posting comics like on the internet. And I was like, I was, because I never, I don't like consider myself a web comics cartoonist. I'm very, or at least for most of my career, I've been very much like hand drawn, and even the like mini comics that I've made myself have almost all been cut and paste because I hate using computers. And so my solution to that would be to like photocopy comics out of my sketchbooks and then cut them up and literally paste them onto like a layout of a book and then put that through a copy machine. So anything that I could do to not touch a computer was really like where I was at. So it's pretty interesting that someone brought up that I'd been posting comics online for, pretty much the entirety of people having home access to the internet.
Yeah. That's awesome. And you mentioned Santa Fe. What sort of locations were you working from during that time?
Well, I was in high school, junior high and high school, so I was working from my parents' house, and sometimes coffee shops and stuff like that. My first comic that I ever published is it was just called Comic Nerd, and it was a split comic with my friend Daniel, the one who did the scanning for us. So it's kind of a flip cover, which I think was kind of utilized a lot in the 90s. Maybe like you flip it over and it's his half. So like you open it and here's his very brushed comic story about a monster attacking a plane, and then you turn it over and it's my autobiographical comics. And this was printed in I want to say like 2001, in an edition of 500 copies, which sounds insane, but we actually did manage to sell and give away and get rid of all of them.
Wow. And that was your first comic that you had published?
Yeah. So, again, like I was drawing comics in like these spiral bound, sketchbooks that I had. I still have all of them. And for this book, I think that I have like a mock-up thing here that we made. And these are cut and pasted, glued together pages. And it's funny because some of them have like holes in them.
Uh-huh.
We're like, this is a garbage piece of paper. But I think that they might have been scanned by Daniel. I'm pretty sure he probably did like the computer cleanup work for this, because I know I didn't learn how to do that until I was well into my late 20s probably. And yeah, the purpose of this book was, we both used it as our portfolio, part of our portfolio when we applied to art school. We both went to the School of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, which we chose because, I chose to go there because you didn't have to declare a major. And I pretty much knew that I wanted to work on comics. And I'm not even sure that there was any school that had a comics degree program. I know that SCAD had some classes, and I think maybe SVA, School of Visual Arts in New York, had some classes. But you didn't have to do like a bachelor at this school. You could just get a diploma, so you could take only art classes. So that was really the thing that enticed me, because I was pretty singularly focused on making comics at this point. But being in New Mexico, the closest like comic book event to us was the San Diego Comic-Con. So somehow we convinced our parents to switch off like yearly, who drove us like 18 hours to San Diego and went to San Diego Comic-Con like 4 years in a row, starting maybe in 98. And so like when we made this book, we gave it to all our favorite, comic artists at that show. Jeff Smith probably had this at one point, or at least, like someone took it on his behalf and threw it in a trash can. I don't know, but I've met Jeff. He's very, very nice. But that was kind of what we were doing with it.
Yeah, that's great. And how would you describe your comics work?
Pretty much purely autobiographical. I was really into like Disney comics when that was like the first like comics that I read were like Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck, because they were in the supermarkets they used to just have single issue comic books, and so that was like the first time that I discovered a comic that wasn't in a newspaper, like a comic strip. And I pretty much knew immediately it was like the combination of my two favorite things, which were cartoons and books, like put together. And I just kind of decided that was what I wanted to make. So I used to make a lot of like parody, like I had a comic called Bat Rat when I was a kid, and he was Batman, but he was a rat, crime fighter. I had a like kind of like a rip-off Milk and Cheese comic called Scott the Angry Paper Cup, who went around and like beat up people who ate meat at fast food restaurants. Getting a little political with my comics there. But it wasn't until I like discovered Ariel Schrag's work, her books, Definition and Potential specifically. She's a couple of years older than me, I think, and she was writing and drawing these really gorgeous black and white autobiographical comics about her experiences in high school while she was still in high school. And that was like the first comic that I looked at, and I was really like, wow, I feel like I can see the way this person like views the world through like how they draw their experiences. And ever since then I was pretty much like, oh, I want to do that too. So yeah, this first little mini comic is kind of the result of that. And a lot of them are not even, they're just like silly, like, oh, here's me thinking about my favorite things: Miss Pac-Man, reading comics, kickball, dinosaurs, my cat Tokyo, going to punk shows, like not hard-hitting stuff, but it was fun, and a lot of people really connected with it. So yeah, I kind of like continued on that path when I went to the museum school.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that'll move us on to the comics production aspect. Can you tell us how you made your comics, what tools you used?
Yeah, so my favorite pens in the world are these Pilot Precise V5 rolling ball pens. You just buy them at an office supply store, and I think that I have such an affinity for them because they were like the pens that we had in our house, but they were like the fancy pens, and so this is what I've always inked my comics with. It was really fun to discover that the comic artist Jeffrey Brown always inks his comics with the Uniball rolling ball pens, which are basically like the same as this. So I was kind of like, oh, that's so fun. We both use this kind of like garbage pen for our art. So I think I guess I would consider myself lo-fi. It's always just been like a pencil and one of these pens. See, I found this when I was in college. I was drawing these kind of comic strips about just like dumb auto-bio stuff. But I really wanted, I love mail ordering things. I like grew up in the era of like, oh, send away for this like tape or this comic or this zine or whatever and get something in the mail. So I was really wanted something that would fit into an envelope, but I also needed to be able to steal the copies from school. So I devised this way to take a single 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper and cut it in half so you can make 2 books, and then fold it over like this, which I mean is not really a great format for a comic book, but it is inventive. I will give me that. And then it just like fit right in an envelope, and you could put just a single stamp on it and then send it away. So I think that I, on my live journal or something, people could like PayPal me $3 and then I would send that to them. But I found the layout of it. And so all of these comics were copied out of my sketchbooks, just straight on the photocopier at school. And then I laid out the book as the full pages. And these are just like taped on there. There's like literally a piece of Scotch tape on the side here. It's so funny to talk about how I made these. And so, I did this cut and tape layout of how the book would be. And then I made it again, but full size. So here's like what would go through the printer. So like I was trying to kind of play around with having the like cover image be like a full drawing, but you fold it in half. And then like, I made like a little collage-y thing for the inside cover that has my credits on it. And then I made flat photocopies of that, because you can't put something that has glued on or taped on pieces like through the, I don't even know what you call it, that top part of the machine that takes all of the pages and makes a book out of it. So yeah, then I had the comics 2 exact same strips per page, so that when they came out, I could cut them in half and collate them and fold them and staple them and make that book. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who would look at something like that and go, wow, well, if you would just scanned them. I mean, I made this in 2005. They're like, you just scan them and put them in like a layout document. It would have been so much faster and easier. And that's probably true, but I just hate using computers so much that this was more amenable to me than sitting down at a computer. And even my first like traditionally published book was called Will You Still Love Me If I Wet the Bed? It was published by Top Shelf Productions in 2005. Even that book, like someone else had to scan the comics for me, and then I sent them to Chris Stars and Brett Warnock at Top Shelf, and I was like, I can't do any editing on these. Like I drew those comics just with one of these pens, just like straight on, not even like nice sketchbook paper. It was on like copier paper. So I was like, I can't, like these look like really bad. So you guys are gonna have to fix the scans, because I just can't, end quote, do it. But the great thing for me about self-publishing and making mini comics is that this silly book is like such a weird format. You can never see something like this published by a graphic novel publisher, is that you get to be creative with the ways that you put things together, including I found this cool little artifact from from my early career. This was a little like stand-up thing, promo thing that I made
Uh-huh.
for Will You Still Love Me If I Wet the Bed? And this was actually from before it came out, when I was still doing maybe some conventions beforehand. But it has this little pouch that the self-published version of that book sits in. And one of the things that has been really fun for me is trying to design some kind of like very unique, eye-catching covers. And so the first edition of this book was 100 copies, and this is white acrylic paint that I painted on this kind of tan cardstock, and then a friend helped me color this image on a computer and then print it on sheets of vellum, which I then cut out and actually hand sewed onto each book. So the idea is like these are all just kind of like cute, like short comics about a relationship that I was in college. So the idea is that we're like stitched together. So like, you're not gonna go to Barnes and Noble and like pull a book off the shelf that has like a hand sewn vellum printed cover like that. So it was kind of like one of the things that I always really tried to like do when I was making these, self-published books.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think that handmade or touched quality definitely makes it what it is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially for me at the time, it was kind of like, okay, well, I moved to Boston, and it was the first time that I really found a comic book shop that had a lot of self-published stuff in it. Million Year Picnic in Harvard Square, which is still there. And when I made that mini comic, I was very much like, okay, well, how do I make this book stand out on the shelves of a place like Million Year Picnic? And so that was my solution to it, and it worked. I went on tour with Kevin, my boyfriend at the time, who the book is about. He was in a one-man band where he like played guitar and drums, but used looping pedals to bring it all together. And we stopped at like, comic shops along the way where I would sell copies of the book on commission, but also I was selling them like at his shows, at the merch table. And I ran out of them like halfway through the tour, and I had just one copy left that I was using as like a sample, and people could pay me and write their address in this little like notebook, and I would mail them a copy when I got home. And when I got back from that, I had emails from most of the stores that I had sold books to being like, oh, like, can we get like 20 more? We sold out of them right away. And I was like, I don't want to hand make this elaborate cover over and over and over again. So that was when I was like, oh, if people like it, maybe someone wants to actually publish it. And so I put together little pitch packets to Top Shelf and High Water Books. And High Water Books was actually a local Cambridge, Massachusetts publisher, but unbeknownst to me, they had like stopped publishing comics before I even submitted my book. But Top Shelf was very interested in, so that's kind of the oral history of that one, how that went from being just like pen on paper comics on copier paper that I was not precious about to this kind of artisanal limited edition mini comic to a book that has remained in print for close to 20 years at this point.
Yeah, that's great. So you told us kind of like how you would ready your comics for print. How did that vary towards your digital format comics, the ones that you would upload on the early days of the internet?
Yeah, so I mean, really, like all I would do is scan. All my art for the most part is black and white. So all I would do is scan it and like adjust the level so that you couldn't see any like leftover pencil marks that I hadn't erased well. And that was about it. I mean, the comics that I posted online, it's funny because I've never considered myself, that's not like what my comics are for. That was just kind of like an easy way to like be like, hey, I make comics. Look at this. Let's get some likes on the internet. Instant dopamine. But I've always considered myself someone who makes comics for print. The first time that I ever had an actual what I would consider to be a web comic was in 2010. I started posting comics all about being single, like in my late 20s, and what societal expectations of that are called. And so like with that, I wasn't like paying attention to format, like all of these comics are like 3-panel kind of like newspaper strips. Like I knew what I wanted them to look like. The thing about posting comics online is that they don't have to be uniform at all. Like some of them were like 5 pages long and some of them were like a single panel. And I even experimented with adding color every once in a while, which was something that I hadn't really done before. But I can't kick that like, oh, I want to have it on paper part of me. So I made like a mini comic version of that, but I tried to make it be a reference to this book that's about being a couple. Well, now it's just me sewn on here, so I kind of resurrected that yellow cardstock, the white acrylic paint, the vellum sewn on for Alone Forever. But it like creates kind of a like, okay, so it doesn't really fit on a page super well because it's 9 panels, and then there's like, ooh, here's a 4-panel one. Oh, here's like a full page one. Here's just a little strip. Here's, so even when I wasn't working in a format that's really meant for self-publishing, like this one, when I published it online, you could like click through each image because they don't have borders, but on this, it's kind of just like on the page. So there's like a freeness to putting comics online digitally, especially if you have no intention to print them. But I've never been able to like be someone who just puts something on the internet and is like, I'm done. So and this book also was published by Top Shelf. It's called Alone Forever, the Singles Collection, and it came out for in February 2014, kind of for like a Valentine's Day funny thing.
Nice. All right. Well, that'll bring us on to our noticing and awareness section. Can you tell us when you first saw evidence of people making their own comics?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, my friend Molly, she made her own zine. She moved to Santa Fe from California and kind of brought like zine culture with her. There's a teen art center in Santa Fe called Warehouse 21 that I spent most of my formative years at. It was a really cool place. There was like computer lab with film editing equipment, a big performance space where local bands and touring bands would play, silk screen studio, different kinds of classes happened there. It was very like multi-purpose art center specifically for teens, which I think is a pretty unique it's a unique thing to have growing up, but I didn't realize it at the time. I was always kind of like oh, we're in Santa Fe, this sucks. I'm sure that people in like New York or Boston have it so much better. And then, I moved there and it's like, oh, actually, there's like no all ages shows. Everything's at a bar. And it's like, oh, I get why my thing was special. Um, and she was like she worked at Warehouse 21 as a teenager, doing lots of different things, but she set up a zine show and permanent library thing for Warehouse 21. And I helped her kind of like archive and index those zines that she was getting as submissions for that show in real time. And that was really like one of the first times that I was like, oh, wait a second.
Yeah.
Oh, you can like just kind of photocopy something and like staple it together and be like, here's the scene. Like one of my screen names that I've used since high school is Crucial Shoes, because there was a hardcore music zine that had an article about which shoes were the most crucial, which I just thought was like the funniest thing. And so, like that was definitely a pretty formative moment for me. Like even the Ariel Schrag thing, like she was self-publishing those as issues, but they were collected and printed by Slave Labor Graphics, which was a small indie comics imprint out of, I think, San Jose in the 90s. And so like I never encountered one of her, like handmade self-published comics. And so seeing these zines that got submitted, and even up until that point, my introduction to zines was mostly like prose stuff. And so seeing people just being like, oh yeah, I just made my whole comic this way. I was like, okay, well, I can do that. I can steal copies from Kinko's with that old key counter thing that you could like hit on the side of the table to make it go back to like 0. So there you go.
All right. Can you tell us a story of getting a comic that maybe surprised or inspired you?
I don't want to tell the story about finding Ariel Schrag's work again. But that is like, like that's kind of the one that I really zero in on.
The aha moment.
That's like the aha moment for me. I mean, like going to comic shows like the Small Press Expo in the early 2000s. I was buying a lot of self-published comics. An entire wall of this room is just like those magazine boxes like filled with people's mini comics. And there were some people who were really like breaking the mold. This guy Ryan Cecil Smith made these really complex cardboard screen printed like fold out comics that are, they're one of my treasured items to this day, just because it's like, how did you even engineer this? Like I can figure out how to lay out a book on some pieces of paper, but like this is like, screen printed, and then he was cutting, like holes in it so that you could see things like underneath it, and it's all this package that like you open the book and it like folds into this. I don't know how we did it, but things like that. I've never made a book like that because that's not in my I don't have the brain capacity for it, but it's one of those things that just makes me be like, man, this medium is like boundless. It is boundless.
Nice. Did you ever read an issue of maybe Fact Sheet 5?
I've definitely seen them actually while I was going through and looking for some of my old comics. I found this, which the Essential Media Discount Counterculture Catalog. And I don't know why I kept it, but it's, like literally just like listings of zines with descriptions and prices. And then in the back, you can use an order form and you can order what you want from them, send them some money in the mail, and they'll supposedly send it back to you. I just kind of thought it was funny that this was like still sitting in, I can't get rid of anything, but it was still sitting in with my stuff for, I don't know what reason, but.
Yeah. So related to kind of Fact Sheet 5, how would you advertise or market your comics, either your print mail order ones or your webcomic ones?
It was really all like word of mouth. I mean, if I found a store that would carry, like self-published comics, I would sell them some or leave them, like on commission. So I'd have to check back and get my money, and I probably never did that. Yeah, and I was late to the like tabling at comic shows game. Think that my first one might have been SPX in 2005 when Will You Still Love Me If I Wet the Bed came out. But then after that, it was like going to every indie comics show that I could get to. So yeah, it was really like word of mouth, a lot of punk rock Pony Express, where it's like, oh, hey, this band is playing and they know like some friend of mine somewhere else. So I'll like give them a copy of this to like give to that person. And yeah, surprisingly, from posting my comics online, whenever, when I made that first comic book, a lot of the comics that were in it had been on my art conspiracy page. And when I, posted that I had a book, people who followed me on that, like ordered copies and stuff. So I feel like I've been blessed to not have to do all that much, marketing and publicizing my own work stuff. I kind of just let people come to me.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll bring us to our community section. Can you tell us the story of how you met your closest friend or peer in comics?
Yeah, so it's hard to choose just one, but I guess that by virtue of length of friendship and how close, I'm like a part of this person's family now. Alec Longstreth is a cartoonist who's been self-publishing his own comic, Phase 7, that's like autobiographical comics, for years. And he's since kind of gotten into doing a digital comic, or a web comic for kids called Isle of Elsie. That's full color. It's very great. And he's also putting out, like collection books of that. But he's like very opposed to having a publisher have any hand in any of his stuff. He's very into total control. So like he even built shed in his backyard to like put all his like books, unsold books in, so when he does like mail order, he can just be like, oh, I gotta go to my shed and get a book out. We met at SPX in 2005. We were both nominated for Ignatz Awards. Me for Outstanding Debut for Will You Still Love Me If I Wet the Bed, and him for, I think, Outstanding Mini Comic for Phase 7. I could be wrong about what specifically his was for, but we started kind of like a guerrilla marketing scheme for like, I would be like, vote for Alec, and then he'd be like, vote for Liz. And so we both won Ignatz Awards that night, which was very special. Yeah. And we just kept in touch. We'd see each other at a bunch of conventions, but then he was living in New York at the time and I was living in Boston. So like he and our other friend Erin Vanier would like come and visit me and vice versa. And happenstantially, I introduced him to one of my best friends from Santa Fe, Claire Sanders, who ended up being his wife. And they have two lovely daughters, and I am their godmother. So it's like a little comics family, but it's so funny because like he has a huge book collection, both mini comics and regular comic books. And his older daughter Suzanne is like pretty, like, she doesn't really understand that that's like not something that everyone has. And so when she first started going to elementary school, they have like a day where they go to the library. And I was visiting and she came home and was like, they were like, oh, did you go to the library today? And she was like, yeah, but it was stupid. They didn't have anything I wanted to read. They didn't have Uncle Scrooge comics. They didn't have Nancy. And I was like, okay. Like, I get it. But at the same time, so it's just a little comic family.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So can you tell us when you felt most connected or maybe least connected to the comics community, or both?
Sure. So, I mean, definitely that 2005 to like 2010 era. I was going to a lot of indie comic shows, making a pretty good core group of friends. We started the karaoke after SPX thing. I think it was in 2000. It was either 2007 or it must have been 2007. We had like this huge, we just went to this like karaoke place and there was like 50 people all trying to cram into this one tiny room, and it was so much fun. And it was even to the point where someone started, the early days of Facebook, someone started a Facebook group called We Hate Your Comics that was basically specifically targeted at like me, Alec Longstreth, Julia Wirtz, Gabby, like our friend group, and I was like, this feels pointed, like someone does not like our friend group, like specifically. So that was a fun time. A time when I felt the least connected to comics. I had an experience a couple of years ago where I was pitching a memoir about like my relationship with my dad, and I was pitching it with an agent for the first time, and so many publishers were like, wow, this is like one of the most exciting pitches we've like ever seen come across our desk. Like, oh, but it's really kind of more like new adult instead of young adult. So like we're gonna have to pass because marketing can't really figure out like where to put it, and I was really like, really? This is what we're doing with comics now? Like, like it's middle grade or nothing. So like, I kind of am shaking my fist at the comics industry, especially because I really feel like there has to be a place for people who grew up reading Raina Telgemeier books to go, like they don't want to read middle grade, books about little girl witches their entire life. And they might not be ready for like, Joe Matt or like Charles Burns, but like there's got to be like an in-between. And I think that space is kind of filled by like Marvel and DC and kind of like this, new superhero books that are kind of more hip and like soap opera-y maybe, but like that's never something that has appealed to me or would, if I grew up being like, oh, I love Raina's autobio books, it's not like I want to go read about Wolverine. So I feel like there's like, and it might be getting better now, but I think that there's this space that like there's room to grow, but comics publishing is so like obsessed with like, oh, we got to get that, we got to get the next big bestseller, you know, like book series. So
yeah. All right. Were you ever a part of any kind of distribution collective?
never been a part of a distribution collective. I'm pretty sure I've had comics sold by distribution collectives. Definitely like Radiator Comics has had my stuff. But I tend to like to do mail order stuff myself. You know, like a place like Quimby's is like a place where, you know, whenever I make a new mini comic, I'll always be like, hey, you guys want some copies? Like, reliably, yes. But for the most part, like, I feel like distribution collectives and like you know, things of that nature, they kind of like seem to me like they're for people who don't love sending stuff in the mail, and I love sending stuff in the mail. So like anytime I got an order, getting to like pack it up and send it was like my favorite thing.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Can you, sorry, or did that one? Who were slash are your most significant peers in comics in terms of maybe how influential they were on your work?
Um, so yeah, I mean, someone who was like very helpful to me when I first started out was Jeffrey Brown, because his comics were very similar to mine, and that was one of the reasons why I thought Top Shelf, they were publishing his, you know, his what has been called the Girlfriend trilogy. Um, so you know, I kind of felt like, oh, mine's like similar but different. And he was really great, you know, in those first formative years for me. Um, Someone like Nicole Georges, who just like is she's like such a comics hustler. Like she's always got something going. She's always teaching classes. She's so very thoughtful about like her work and how she talks about other people's work. She's someone who, you know, I consider a very close personal friend, but I'm also always in awe of the work that she puts out. I actually used to have a little comics collective myself. We did these books called Four Squares. And so the idea was that there was four of us who all lived in Somerville, Massachusetts, and were very good friends, spent a lot of time together, and all drew comics. I kind of like I kind of strong armed my friends into making autobio comics with me, even though it was people who didn't necessarily do that. So Maris Wicks, who's drawn a bunch of like science comics for First Second, our friend Tim Finn, who's an animator and comics professor, Joe Quinones, who is mostly like a Marvel DC guy. He did like the Howard the Duck comics. And then myself. And so the project was we would pick a month and then we'd all draw a diary comic for that day. And like you could kind of see Maris and Joe were a couple. So like, you know, they were pretty much always in people's comics, but like, you know, if we were spending time together, then you'd end up getting like a different view of the same situation. So like, here's a comic about Maris and I went to New York for Alec Longstreth's going away party. So like we both drew different versions of that rooftop party. I'm actually no longer friends with any of them except for Tim. Had kind of a bad falling out, but we did three. We wanted to do like a book for each season. So this was the springtime season, and we did three of them. And this is still one of my favorite projects that I've ever been involved in, just because it's like so fun to see like all these different but people who interact all the times, like comics that take place on the same day. And I've gone on to do kind of similar projects with like someone like Nicole George's.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll bring us towards our wrap-up section. Can you tell us what you miss about that time?
I mean, going to so many comic shows and like having such a close-knit community is definitely something that I miss. I mean, we're all like in our 40s now, and people have families or, have stopped making comics and have, like 9 to 5 jobs or, work in animation. And, I haven't been to a comic show either as someone who was like tabling or just as someone who's just looking around since COVID.
Mhm.
And I just feel like very disconnected from like what is the scene like. Do people still, I mean, I assume people still self-publish
Mhm.
their comics. I have noticed that there's like a lot more kind of like artsy, craftsy stuff at some of these shows where it used to really be just like strictly comic books. I don't have a problem with that. It's just something that I like noticed recently. I actually bought this insanely cute pair of I don't know if they're supposed to be swim trunks, but I use them as swim trunks, but they're just like little shorts that have like frogs all over them that
Oh.
somebody was at SPX, like they, made the print or whatever that they made the shorts out of. And I was like, these are amazing. I wish I remembered who they were because I had them for probably like 7 years at this point. I would like to buy another pair, but yeah, I'm just like, I'm not as in the game anymore.
Mhm.
Like I can kind of see from afar, like on Instagram, like who that group is, who's like, it's like, oh, that's like what my friends and I were like back then. Like this is that group of people now. It's humbling and also a little bittersweet to see.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything you don't miss about that time?
I mean, like traveling can always be a pain in the ass. Like flying has never been my favorite thing. So like, oh, I'm not like flying for some comic show and shoving a bunch of books inside like a roller bag every month. Like, okay, I can deal with that. But no, I mean like it was probably the most fun period of my life. And I'm hoping to, when I have a new book come out, not during COVID. I'm very excited to get back to going to shows.
Yeah. All right. Can you give us one more memory or anecdote?
Let's see, what could be appropriate to tell on here? Well, trying to think of ones that don't involve me smooching people at comics shows because that was kind of my thing for a while. Yeah, I don't know. Some of my favorite times involve taking, the small press expo is in Maryland, and so being in the Boston area, friends and I would like carpool down there, and I love a good road trip. So like being on a road trip with like some of my closest friends and being like, oh my God, a Taco Bell. We're going to stop and eat Taco Bell. Sometimes the journey was like as good. Yeah, just like meeting people whose comics I love and then having them be like, I love your comics too. It's like, what? In what world? So,
Yeah. All right. Well, our final question would be, can you tell us 3 people who you can think of who we should contact for these archives?
yes. So you should contact Ariel Schrag because I think that's a pretty unique experience to have been drawing comics about your experiences in high school while you were in high school, and then like going to comic shows and selling them and having, a publisher publish them. I can't even imagine like how that workload was juggled. Like, how did you draw? And these aren't like little comics. These are like long books. Like, I think Potential's like over 200 pages long. It's like, how did you do that while you were like a junior in high school? So like, I would be very interested to hear about that. Nicole Georges is someone who's been making zines, and has been a champion for all things zines and mini comics, since she was in high school. We're a very similar age. And we'll just go nepotism. And, my friend Alec Longstreth, I met him because he self-publishes comics. He's currently, actually, I don't think he's a professor at CCS anymore, but he does their like outreach stuff for them. But he's just kind of like it's like such a comics cheerleader, like he's so excited about comics. And he might be someone who's like really interesting to talk to.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much. That'll conclude our interview. Where can our viewers find more of your work, or do you have any projects that you'd like to promote?
My most recent book to come out, hold on, let me go grab it. Is Science Comics Frogs, Awesome Amphibians. I got to write about my favorite animals and draw a comic about them. This book was colored by my friend Jim Kettner, because I don't color stuff, and he like really did a lot of heavy lifting on this. I would have to say, like, his colors really make it. Had a lot of fun working on this, and all my friends are probably sick of hanging out with me when we're somewhere where we might see a frog, and so it's like I got to talk about frogs, but in book form. I'm currently drawing a summer camp memoir from going to summer camp in the 70s by Shelley Bond, who was an editor at like Vertigo in the 90s and 2000s. So that's like a fun project, and that book should probably be out like in the spring, I think. And those are kind of the two newest things.
All right. And where can people find your work?
Hasn't been updated in many years, but there are, comics on there and some links. I also do not update my Instagram that much, but Liz Prince Comics on Instagram has some stuff on there. It's really funny because I used to be like very into social media, like I had the Tumblr that I updated all the time, but I just like can't make myself care anymore. Trying to get better about that.
That's
if you want to find my books, pretty much, any reputable comic shop, if they don't have some of them, they can order them for you. So if you're at all interested in seeing any of this stuff, maybe not in its self-published form, but in, whatever collected form it ended up in afterwards, go to your local comic book store. Tell them Liz Prince sent you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for listening or watching. And that'll conclude this episode.
Thanks for joining us. This has been a production of the Sequential Artists Workshop, or SAW. You can find us on social media at Comics Workshop and online at sawcomics.org. You can hear about our many courses at learn.sawcomics.org. SAW is a nonprofit and supported by people like you. Learn how to make a tax-deductible donation at the donate page of sawcomics.org. You can join our free community of comics explorers at members.sawcomics.org. Thanks so much for being here.